We are located on the river Elbe near Hamburg and want to sail in the direction of the North Sea to gain the necessary distance from problems that some crew members share with each other. That's me, Stephan, who decided to make this film and tell our experiences. And this is Doc Alec, who helps us to learn how to run a ship and is also a marine biologist. Simone is also on board on this trip. She wants to get herself ready for a time full of adventures in the years to come. Preventing death is what our journeys are all about, as adventures on the way to curing cancer. I have been exploring the oceans and making films about the coral seas for years. I am particularly interested in the search for substances for use in medicine. For us, cancer presents itself as a human average and therefore fascinates us. To dive, especially shipwrecks, because in case of average, people often come very close to death, or even dying, which is why we choose my former girlfriend and patient at the time, Simone, to enable a sailing adventure. Shipwrecks attract us again and again magically, because these artificial reefs are special biotopes. To create new creatures and plants with perhaps new substances and abilities that are still unknown to us for medicine. What is interesting for us is how wreck biotopes with a higher toxin load still thrive and how these toxins affect life in the wreck ecosystem. It is astonishing how nature makes a wreck its own over decades. As marine scientists, we are always drawn to the sea, far away from the experiences of the past. Simone takes the wheel of the schooner and sails the ship confidentially like a one-eyed pirate. However, Simone is not a pirate, of course, but she does indeed steer the ship with only one eye, just like a real pirate would. Also on board the schooner are my brother Fabian and my friend Doc Alec. The bitter experience with the topic of cancer connects us four in different ways. Fabian and I, 1 year ago, we had lost our much younger sister at the age of only 32 years to the direct consequences of a first infusion of the chemo poison paclitaxel for breast cancer treatment agonisingly. Also, many chemo poisons are from plants like the taxans. For example, the paclitaxel is a poison from the Pacific fire yacht tree. Simone has a bad cancer, a malignant melanoma in her eye. The tumor already blinded her in the right eye. Despite the fact that such ocular melanomas are very rare tumor diseases, they are usually metastasizing quickly and quite often end up deadly. Their prognosis was very poor, and that time, in spring 2013, with a tumor in the eye about 1 centimeter in size, and then conventional therapies such as radiation and even an attempted eye removal surgery failed for health reasons. From then on, Simone found herself forced to take other paths and embarked on an adventurous journey in search of healing herself. I still had a deep memory of the suffering of my then wife when she was nearly killed because of a gastric lymphoma, had to go through the hell of chemo and surgery for almost a year. Yeah, in point of my dad, and they found he had a brain tumor. What I then saw was how this chemotherapy and radiation therapy executed my father in the last few months that he still had. I had already lost my father as a child due to his illness. Sailing away from this is now a means for us to distance ourselves from the aggressiveness that is going on in oncological medicine today. People are deliberately exposed to a resulting risk of death with highly toxic chemicals and radiation. A cancer diagnosis and thus death before one's eyes induces a tremendous fear of dying soon, which is also exploited by medicine to sell life-threatening, highly toxic therapy methods. Cancer patients surrender all too often and far too quickly to doctors' instructions. Not so Simone and many other patients whom we met on our travels at a distance from conventional medicine. Cancer therapies in particular seem like a game of survival or death. Of course, tumors can kill, but to what extent every human being is exposed to the danger of poison and radiation, which are also strong carcinogens, as well as to the consequences of surgery to die, must be left to each individual. No alternative therapies may be withheld from the patient. Travel in itself is also such a therapy to give strength to the psyche and the immune system to fight cancer. Our new motto is to overcome fears and try out things that were previously inconceivable for all of us, but which seem to make scientific sense. Everything that is fun is tried out to mobilize the survival forces. Simone dares a flight with a motor glider and would like to fly around the world with such a glider, but unfortunately she is blind on one eye due to the tumor and therefore no longer able to become a pilot herself. Many drugs and plant substances are not approved for oncological therapy and may not be used by doctors, even if they so wish. Without further ado. But every human must decide for himself, without legal consequences, which remedies against life-threatening diseases are his choice.
Und du, Frank, hättest auch damit rechnen können, dass ich hier reinlanden will, ne? Und du breitest hier deinen Schirm aus.
Das ist voll cool.
Komm her, warte.
Bringt voll Spaß.
Okay.
It's the first time I went through cancer, I expressed myself and I wrote a song. And then the next song I will sing second is going to be my closure of how I think cancer is in my life. And I am a cancer survivor. Try to fly away, but it's impossible.
After Simone's first sailing experiences, we have now decided to fundamentally change our lives. Via the internet, we find an old sailing yacht to buy in Croatia at the Adriatic Sea and spontaneously travel to Pula, where we win the yacht with the name Contentious Eagle for us. For almost 30 years, the boat had been owned by the Englishman Derek, who sailed many regattas with the boat and even won some. For the briefing, we sail the boat owned together with Derek and his German wife in Pula. So you are absolutely a passionate sailor.
I was,
Okay, and why you are not more?
because I fell down a flight of stairs, broke my neck and broke my hand. And the orthopedic surgeon said to me, "Your sailing days are over." And
Okay.
unfortunately, he was correct.
Unfortunately, we have to learn a good year later that Derek died miserably from the consequences of a knee joint operation. He had been infected with an antibiotic-resistant germ in a German hospital. Despite leg amputation and rescue attempts, Derek died of sepsis. Maybe Derek could have learned a lot from Simone and our experience in pain therapy to avoid surgery or otherwise treat for infection and sepsis. There are some natural substances that could help against antibiotic-resistant germs. Many essential oils of plants contain substances and terpenes that can kill MRSA and resistant bacteria and have a strong antiseptic effect. Sepsis and associated organ failure can also be treated unconventionally with essential oils, cannabinoids, high doses of vitamin C intravenous, thiamine, and a little hydrocortisone. As always, Simone makes a daily effort to make her own fresh vegetable smoothies. A side trip to the sea turtle rescue station of Pula awakens our desire to go diving again soon, and maybe we will see turtles in the sea later. Doc Alec and Fabian are enthusiastic about these animals and ask themselves how these turtles manage to be such good navigators that after decades of life in the sea, they find their birthplace for laying eggs again and again, as if they have some kind of built-in GPS in their brains. Fascinating that the freshly hatched turtle, at the moment when it comes out of the sand for the first time into the sea, will remember and recognize where in the world it must go again exactly. How this works is still a mystery. Most likely, it is a mixture of recognizing magnetic field lines, similar to what birds do, perhaps in combination with astronavigation. People can't perceive magnetic field lines with their eyes like seabirds, but fortunately they have compass, GPS and chart plotters on our smartphones. We finally set sail from Pula and head south. It is now autumn and we dream of spending the winter in warm waters with diving. First of all, we drive to the Croatian island town Mali during calm weather and marvel how beautiful it is here. Course south shall lead us to Egypt, into the Red Sea. A long way with a small sailing yacht that is only about 10 kilometers per hour fast, or better formulated, slowly progressing. But as you know, the way is the goal, and on our trip to the south there is a lot to discover. We complete our provisions and engines the next day further into the Croatic island world. The close coexistence on board is a challenge and the weather so far hardly sailable. Too little wind, which worries us as to how far we can go south before winter sets in. Due to lack of wind, we mainly motor through Croatia and pass the Kornati National Park, consisting of 89 islands. This is the densest sea area with islands in the entire Mediterranean Sea. We were able to moor somewhere safe between the islands just in time before the first violent Bora storm raged over us in the night. We sail and motor further between the islands to Rokognica and get to know where two dropouts on a sailing yacht beside us, Joa and Flo, who also want to go south before the approaching winter. The two had their noses full from their jobs, just like us, and silvered everything to afford the yacht and getting out at sea. Somehow, it is much more fun to be on the road with like-minded people. What a coincidence! Also, Joa and Flo had bought their yacht at the same time as us and also wanted to sail south. We reach a small fjord and Alec and I go diving here first. Simone wants to swim and has no idea what's going on underwater. Better that way, too, because she had better not be after the last thunderstorm.
Ja, jetzt ist auch egal.
Ich brauche mal ein bisschen. Ich muss langsam werden.
Nichts ist so blöd, als wenn man nass gespritzt wird, ne?
Even in the sea and on the islands, plants and animals live with substances that are already known for their anti-cancer effects. We want to pursue this in the course of our sailing journey. She loves nature and swimming in the sea. Our next trip takes us to the port of Split, the second largest city in Croatia after Zagreb. The old town with the Diocletian Palace has been declared a World Heritage Site. The river, probably the most famous landmark of the city, promenade, lies directly at the sea alongside the harbor bay. We explore Split and enjoy the architecture. Ashore, Simone uses every opportunity to get freshly squeezed juices. Fresh, direct juice from pomegranate, broccoli, carrots, beetroot, mixed with mango and papaya are a delicious supply of vitamins and enzymes. Best every 2 hours, such a glass of juice is Simone's plan. The trick with the high-dose vitamin strategy against cancer, and especially cancer stem cells, lies in a continuously high blood serum level of vitamins, which can only be achieved by long-term regular administration every 1 to 2 hours. So many different phytochemicals, vitamins and enzymes get into humans. Science has already discovered that the combination of high-dose vitamin C with an old standard antibiotic, doxycycline, has a killing effect on cancer and especially cancer stem cells. Simone and I decide to leave the boat in Split to explore the interior of Croatia. It seemed like a dream to us to climb directly from a rubber dinghy into a seaplane in the harbor of Split and to be able to land in front of the marina in Pula, where our car stood. We were lucky and were the only 2 passengers of the still young airline for this flight. The flight in a seaplane is exciting every second, because the free view into the cockpit on the pilots, when these machines also still fly quite low, makes much possible to observe.
And then we'll continue on to Pula, Prior to departure, we need to go with a safety briefing. 6 exits, 2 doors up front. You guys are lucky there's an emergency window exit.
From Pula, we drive to the land of falling lakes. The most impressive natural spectacle in Croatia consists of 16 lakes, which are connected by waterfalls, overflows, and cave systems over lengths of about 7 kilometers. On the karst mountains, the Plitvice stream plunged over an 80-meter high rock into the depths, forming Croatia's highest waterfall. For me, the waterfalls of the Plitvice Lakes National Park seem like a mystical place where the secrets of freshwater life can be found. Also here, in the lakes, lives an ancient and tiny little animal, only 2 centimeters small, from which oncology research can still learn a lot. Scientists have found out that the hydra, a widespread freshwater polyp, consists mainly of stem cells and regularly forms overaged and damaged cells from dividing stem cells. These stem cells divide in her throughout her life and produce all cell types that are necessary for the new formation or regeneration of her body. The hydra renews itself continuously so that it can become older despite constant reproduction, without decaying, completely different from the aging in humans. The hydra consists only of up to 100,000 cells and renews all cells from the dividing stem cells every 20 days. The special thing about her is her ability to form and exchange nerve cells. It has now been discovered that hydra and humans have the same gene that regulates stem cells. Only the way in which defective or old cells are eliminated is different in hydra. In more highly developed life forms, including humans, the renewal of highly specialized cells is no longer possible, and the death of any defective cells can sometimes get out of control, leading to cancer. The hydra, on the other hand, does not age because its mortality does not change with aging. For science, the regulation of cell activity is the key to influencing aging and preventing tumor development. Interestingly, the hydra polyp also possesses an endocannabinoid neurotransmitter system just like in humans. It only consists for more than 500 million years of different development, and yet the hydra has about as many genes as humans, about 20,000. And even 6,071 genes of the hydra are identical to those of humans. We sail on to Dubrovnik with its fantastic old town, which was once called the Pearl of the Adriatic. We like Dubrovnik very much with its alleys of the old town, but we can't take so much time to stay anymore because we want to go south faster, but are always decelerated by the beauty of the Adriatic cities. Slowly we sail on to Greece, to the island of Corfu. The island is a green dream in the Aegean Sea. It is characterized by rugged mountains and cliffs, as well as beautiful beaches. Corfu's cultural heritage reflects the years it experienced under Venetian, French and British rule before the island finally fell to Greece in 1864. Corfu city, or better Kerkyra, is rightly regarded as one of the most beautiful cities in Greece, because the island metropolis unfolds multicultural flair. We stay at the Govia Marina, one of the largest marinas in the Mediterranean, and prepare our trips to southern Greece. I have worked in a bank for 10 years, and this banking crisis had made it all very stressful and very annoying, and many layoffs. And that's why I just wanted to get out of this business and this job. I was just through mentally, and that's why I wanted to do something new. And since my sister also fell ill with cancer and died afterwards of the consequences, I just wanted to get out of this world and do something else. And luckily that happened because I left the bank and we went on a trip. In Govia we met our sailing friends Joe and Flo again, who decided to spend the winter on Corfu and only in spring to continue their course south. But the weather is still very nice in late autumn, and we set sail past the islands of Paxos, Antipaxos, Kefalonia to Zakynthos. One late afternoon we reached the bay enclosed by rocks called Navagio, which is in Greek means a shipwreck. We are alone with our yacht in the famous wreck bay and take advantage of the hour to inspect the wreck on the beach. The old rusted steel colossus with its smuggler legend appears to us uncanny, after which the ship was full of duty unpaid cigarettes on a mission for the mafia. The ship drifted here in 1980 in a storm to the beach, but the captain described in court that due to engine problems the ship was grounded in the bay, and later a lot of technology was stolen from the ship there. He was acquitted. Sailing further south, we circumnavigate the Greek mainland, the Peloponnese Peninsula, and set course for the island of Kythera. In Greek mythology, Kythera is the island of Aphrodite. The goddess of love is said to have been born here from the sea foam and to have gone ashore. After our trips from the Adriatic Sea to the Aegean Sea, we set course for Crete and sailed to the old pirate nest Chania. The city was also the capital of Crete for a long time before the larger Heraklion became the capital of Crete in 1971. Simone and I loved the evening strolls over the promenade of the old Venetian port of Chania, where we stay with our sailing yacht again and again and for a long time in the marina. On the Hamburg Cathedral, Simone drives with my 5-year-old niece in a car scooter. For Simone, herself a mother who suffered from cancer, it is hardly bearable that my sister and the mother of my niece died directly within a few hours from the consequences of chemotherapy and would not have died from the breast cancer for a long time. A comprehensive therapy which I consider very promising. So one should not rely on a single form of therapy. A tumor is not a homogeneous structure. In order to effectively eliminate this tumor, a large number of different substances are needed, which have different reactions. And of course, nature offers us a huge cocktail.
Da bietet uns die Natur natürlich einen riesigen Cocktail.
Dann sagst du Bescheid, ja? In ganz zart. Es ist zwar jetzt kalt und schlapprig, aber das ist nicht schlimm. Das ist nur Wasser und so eine.
Simone's renewed sonographic diagnosis of the eye and the organs confirms to her that the tumor in the eye has hardly changed in the last 2 years and that no metastases in the liver and elsewhere are recognizable by imaging. This may have been due to Simone's own therapeutic strategies, such as the malaria poison artemisinin from the plant Artemisia annua, the annual mugwort, and many other well-known remedies from herbs, roots and spices, curcumin, cardamom and long pepper, as well as incense and various other essential oils. Highly toxic chemocytostatic drugs are out of the question for Simone as tumor therapy. If at all poisons, only with selective toxicity on exclusively cancer cells that cannot kill you, but only kill the tumor. Simone changed her diet to a highly anti-inflammatory vegan diet with lots of freshly squeezed vegetable juices, e.g. lots of fresh broccoli and Brussels sprouts juice. The healing powers known to traditional medicine are contained in substances from roots, the bark of trees and lianas like honocchiol and magnolol in the bark of Chinese magnolia trees. Interestingly, both honocchiol and magnolol have selective cytotoxic effect on cancer cells via the activation of the cannabinoid receptors of the cells. The healing effects of magnolia bark and cannabis against cancer had already been described in traditional medicine.
The endocannabinoid system, which involves the 2 compounds we discovered and the receptors that were found, 2 receptors now, CB1 and CB2. Acting when the CB1 receptor starts to act, it causes the psychoactivity, and which is not desirable from a medical point of view, definitely. Yeah. The activation of CB2 does not do that. Activation of CB2 causes only, I would say, positive effects. It's more or less parallel to the immune system.
The endocannabinoid system is a biological system of receptors and neurotransmitters found throughout the brains and nervous systems in all mammalian species. The ECS permeates all 11 main physiological systems in the body, working to handle the many functions necessary for survival. The ECS tunes our vital physiological functions. It promotes homeostasis and affecting everything from sleep, appetite, pain, inflammation, memory, mood and reproduction. The ECS helps to regulate homeostasis across all the major physiological systems. Ensuring they are all working in harmony, CB2 receptors are within the immune system and many other areas of the body working primarily to reduce inflammation throughout the body. Inflammation is a process the body undergoes to heal infected or damaged areas in the body. inflammation is a main cause of many different medical conditions in each part of the body. The endocannabinoid system performs different tasks. The ECS always has one goal in mind: homeostasis. Endocannabinoids are molecules that closely resemble the main phytochemical in the cannabis plant called delta-9-tetrahydrocannabinol, or short THC. Because THC is so similar to the brain's own endocannabinoids, such as anandamide and 2-AG, smoking cannabis directly affects the brain of the user. When someone smokes cannabis, the THC molecules quickly reach the brain. There, the THC competes with the brain's endocannabinoids to bind with cannabinoid receptors in neurons that regulates dopamine activity. Increased dopamine release produces the positive feelings with the cannabis high.
And this system is involved in a huge number of disease states.
Only in recent decades had science investigated the anti-cancer effect of the endocannabinoid neurotransmitter system. Simone sets off for the Czech Republic, a more relaxed country in the handling of cannabis, where the possession and cultivation of cannabis has already been decriminalized in a private setting. In the field of cannabis, the most important trade fair in Europe takes place in Prague at the beginning of November each year, as well as a specialist congress on the subject of cannabis as a medicine. Via the internet, we got to know many other patients, physicians, scientists and cannabis activists and met them at the Cannabis Festival in Prague. In the Czech Republic, the handling of cannabis is much less complicated than in Germany and similar to Spain, Austria and Holland. The trade with cannabis seeds and even plant cuttings is allowed. A tour of the fair gives the impression that cannabis substances help many people with all sorts of ailments and are rather regarded as medicine in the Czech Republic. The power of cannabis against cancer results from the synergistic performance of many phytocannabinoids and terpenes. For the fight against cancer, the THC is in the foreground, but CBD also serves the THC as reinforcement against cancer cells and alleviation of psychoactivity. Simone tries her hand at a vaporizer, the famous verdamper from Holland, and inhales a good load of high percentage CBD cannabis blossoms as a test. The effects of a cannabis intoxication occur only a short time later and completely relaxed her.
So lange kannst du? Wow.
Siehst du, da was kommt?
Das muss ich üben. Ich kann einfach auflegen. So richtig.
Bob Marley might have turned in his grave if he had known that THC could only indirectly induce apoptosis, the cell suicide, in cancer cells. Bob Marley, who was seriously ill with melanoma himself at the time, probably had no idea that the dose of THC was important, because only a high dose of THC has an anti-tumoral effect in humans, according to the practical findings of the scene. Bob Marley had been treated with chemo in Germany for a long time without success before his death. Marley died of his melanoma brain metastases.
The psychoactive effects of cannabinoids include things like euphoria, feelings of well-being, relaxation, stress reduction. So we should keep this in mind and talk to the doctors and say that, well, some psychoactivity may not be that bad. Cannabinoids, and we know that cannabinoids can kill cancer cells. And what we know today is that what cannabinoids do on cancer cells is activating a cellular program that is called apoptosis, which in very easy words means suicide. So in summary, we know that cannabinoids inactivate AKT and induce cancer cell death by apoptosis. And this happens not only in glioblastoma cells, but also in breast cancer cells and in many other different types of cancer cells. At least the three main features of this molecular mechanism that I just described occur in basically all the cancer cells or cancer models that have been studied. And this is very good because when you combine THC and CBD, you are attacking the tumors from different sides. And the response, the final response, is greater than the one produced by each of the compounds separately. So the difference may be who is the trigger of these responses. If THC, in the case of glioblastomas, for example, we have seen that THC is the most effective one. Or CBD, in the case of HER2-positive cancer, we know that CBD works at least as good as THC, but the final cellular response seems to be the same. So it's cells committing suicide in response to cannabinoids. Well, no, they are trying to move to a clinical trial with glioblastoma patients and with patients with GBM, glioblastomas, and away from the big pharma companies.
Eating of the most potent cannabis extract, which you can produce, you usually start with small doses of about 5 milligrams and then increase the dose gradually to about 1 gram a day.
I myself have witnessed how a friend of mine in Prague, within 45 days, by daily application of THC oil to his basal cell carcinoma, brought this completely into remission and achieved a clean wound healing.
Yeah, they have the right to do whatever they think it's necessary to heal themselves. So that's a right, that's a human right. So nobody has the right to forbid them to do what they think is best for their health.
In Prague, we follow home patients who prefer to remain anonymous, and they share with us their knowledge about the cultivation of medicinal cannabis strains that contain a lot of CBD. Cannabis activists show Simone in Prague how extracts are produced from cannabis plants. The question is always whether substances also work and help in humans, even if the efficacy have been researched, proven and credible in cell cultures or mouse studies. It can also work in humans, but it can also fail or even have considerable side effects. The effect of cannabinoids on cancer and the selective cytotoxic effect on cancer cells is now well established in laboratory studies and credibly demonstrated in many anecdotal patient cases worldwide. However, a guarantee of survival and healing or probability of healing is not possible for the individual. What concerns me is the fact that it was the cannabis medicine researchers from Madrid, in particular Cristina Sanchez and Manuel Guzman, who were the first to personally file and obtain international patents for the use of cannabinoids on cancer cells from their publicly funded scientific work at the beginning of the millennium. However, their patent benefits later ended up with GW Pharmaceuticals in England, one of the largest cannabis medicine companies in the world, which is closely associated with the pharmaceutical giant Bayer. To the entire pharmaceutical industrial complex, its lobby influence on the politics, as well as the legislation and with it the persecution of sick people for the illegal use of cannabis as medicine, I can only hold the words of Henry Thoreau against the duty to disobey the state, especially when you are morally right and don't harm anyone else. Also, the biochemical understanding of how THC and CBD from cannabis flowers inhibit, kill and have an anti-metastatic effect on cancer cells has been known for a long time. It remains an experiment of each individual patient to determine whether it also functions in the individual human being. The decisive difference in the use of cannabinoids with a high antitumoral dosage to a highly toxic cytostatic chemo is that cannabis cannot induce death. And the side effects of cannabis in humans are sometimes beneficial, if not desirable, in the worst case controllable, but not life-threatening. It seems crucial to me how much dose at least is required to achieve success with cannabinoids and terpenes against cancer. And this will even be different for each person. So it is more important that more than enough of it is taken and that there are no dangerous disadvantages from a possible overdose, from chemocytostatic drugs to lethal doses. In addition, phytochemicals can be easily combined with other drugs, have a selective cytotoxic effect on almost all cancer cells. The CBD is important to inhibit the psychotropic effect of THC, even to enhance the antitumoral effect of THC, and CBD has anti-inflammatory, anti-epileptic, as well as analgesic and neuroprotective effects. CBD also indirectly acts antitumorally by producing and secreting endocannabinoids from the body and by triggering cell lysis of tumor cells. With the laboratory distillation, the solution, alcohol, was recovered and an oily concentrate of mainly cannabinoids and terpenes remains. The secret of the cannabis effect lies in the interaction of many different cannabinoids and terpenes of the plant. The many varieties have very different effects on the metabolism, the immune system, and the psyche of humans. An extract of the whole cannabis flower with all substances is always more complex, more effective and better than an isolated single substance, such as THC or CBD as a drug alone. This still hot liquid extract is usually mixed with the native coconut oil as carrier fat and filled into syringes for later filling of capsules, which are then used for rectal ingestion as suppositories or orally as tablets. The oil from the syringes can also be absorbed as drops directly into the mouth via the mucous membranes, usually under the tongue. Only when the THC acid from the raw flower is heated sufficiently does the THC transform and thus have partially receptor activating and thus psychoactive effect in the brain, as if THC were to unfold its full anti-cancer effect via internal cell signaling pathways. The mangoes contain terpenes, terpene myrcene, which is also contained in cannabis. So now I had the leaves and blossoms and prepare the smoothie or the amount, which is then frozen in ice cubes. Here I have a freshly squeezed juice of beetroot, carrot, broccoli and other ingredients, and here I add the fresh smoothie, which can be drunk fresh for the good. If the flowers are only processed raw, e.g. in smoothies, there is no psychoactivity of the THC, but nevertheless other but weaker mechanisms of action against all kinds of diseases, as well as against cancer cells.
Der dann frisch getrunken werden kann. Zum Wohl.
Crete is a paradise for sun lovers, not only on the beaches, but also in the mountains, where Simone feels attracted. Many endemic medicinal plants grow in the gorges of the mountain ranges, especially Oreganum dictamnus. The plant grows wild only in the mountain canyons of Crete, as in the famous Samaria Gorge. Dictamnus is considered as a universal medicinal herb. Dictamnus infusions in the teas are said to promote wound healing and alleviate digestive problems. The Greek doctors of antique believed that Dictamnus could even cure all diseases. The plant is also used as an extract tincture, as well as its essential oil for various ailments as a traditional remedy. Especially the active ingredients rosolic acid and cavacrol, as well as thymol, which occurs mainly in thyme, are used in many ways, mainly as a biocide. Matala was a stronghold for hippies and dropouts in the 60s. Especially the rock caves there served as dwellings for the international hippie community. For us, the second most beautiful beach of all Greece lies on Crete in the Bay of Elafonisi, a kind of sandbank with turquoise flat water and finest sandy beach, as well as dunes. Here, on the offshore island of Elafonisi, much wild thyme grows. The thymol and cavacrol it contains have a strong antibiotic and cytotoxic effect on cancer cells. The bactericidal and fungicidal properties of cavacrol were already known in ancient Egypt. Generally, the substances from the mountain teas of Crete, such as Oreganum dictamnus, are very effective as natural fungicides, antibiotics, and in the fight against cancer cells. In many herbs, spices, and essential oils, as well as in hops and cannabis, a phytochemical is almost always present. Beta-caryophyllene is a terpene and cannabinoid at the same time and has a cytotoxic effect on cancer cells and regulates inflammation via its selective partial binding to the cannabinoid receptor 2. These wild herbs belong in every dish of the Mediterranean diet. I am still of the opinion that I would like to continue growing my own cannabis. I can get it on prescription now, but it doesn't do me any good. It brings me nothing what I experience now in the last months in the pharmacy. I don't know what is available in the pharmacy right now. That they want their support, or at least what they want behind me. Yes, I can only say that the concern is that I have known her for a long time now and have also followed her path and have also gone with her into therapy and so have also followed her development. I find this incredible because I can also imagine what kind of pain syndrome they have and how it strikes again relentlessly in between. It is not a problem at all, so I am willing to bear the responsibility, even if they get into legal difficulties. Come, times a statement of an experienced pain therapist who orientates himself in the modern and does not remain stuck in the old chemistry. he can then certainly make very positive statements in the case. As a doctor, you have to ask yourself some very hard questions. I do it right? What medicine am I for now? Am I for medicinal plants? For no harm to the patients? Or am I a Novalgine prescriber, which in the end is completely beside it? When you see, for example, his fate, through which he went through everything he had for comas, that they give him on medication, for example, uncritically together. So I don't want to say bombs together now, but it comes pretty close to the truth. And when you then see on the other side how such a patient develops, even under self-therapy, I mean, he doesn't do it for fun and tolerance. No matter how much quality you have to produce in order for it to work properly, well, that's why I've applied to the bee farm for cultivation again. You will see what will become of it now. It will probably take a few years again. I don't know what will come out of it, but at least I have all possibilities again. Everything, exhausted to be on the safe side to some extent, to not necessarily have to supply myself with contaminated material from the pharmacy now, or even to go to bed with the fear that tomorrow I won't get anything, or only get what I can't stand. Therefore, there is still no option for self-growing and self-sufficiency for me. For example, I smelled mold on some batches. That is, of course, quite counterproductive. Yes, I am certainly familiar with the 3 Canadian varieties, which I already had myself, which had the same musty smell, which indicates mold, and my health is now really too good for that. That is highly dangerous. That's right, it doesn't work that way. What about the cancer patients? What about our severely disabled people? What do we do with them? We do not only poison them chemically, but we also instabilize them, we make them bedridden, we tie them to the ventilators. This cancer therapy, as it is now being propagated, is all about a new monoclonal antibody. A colored picture in the German medical journal, and then there's a butterfly, and then there's the name. I am not allowed to say that now, the name of the medicine, and then there's with the wings of the butterfly, learned from nature. And do you know what the drug is approved for? That is approved when they have all the drugs, when the poor patients are still behind them and have survived the therapies and the ovarian cancer so far. Then they get that gain so that they can survive another 5 months longer. That is the study medicine. I completely reject that. Every person is different. I can only oppose this whole development with a very strong no. I also got to know a lot of patients who have already treated themselves with alternative strategies. And I would like to tell you a story about a person I was able to witness personally and had prostate cancer, which was also treated surgically by removing the whole prostate. Then he was seriously harmed with radiation therapy, and then he was treated for a year with hormone withdrawal therapy. But it still led to metastasis of the lungs. He then opted for other strategies and used cannabis extracts for 6 months, as well as plant extracts from vegetables and herbs. As a result, the lung metastasis had disappeared. After about a year, these herds were no longer detectable in PET-CT. He attributes the success exclusively to these chosen alternative strategies. The fact that we are now allowed to use medicinal cannabis in Germany because of the doctor prescribes it on prescription is all well and good. But at the same time, the legislator has so arranged that in the pharmacy the price has doubled to the previous situation. And if the cash does not take it over, which is approximately the case with 40% of the cases, then one is dependent on spending either with the prescription very much more money in the pharmacy, or to say I can it also only illegally. It is an emergency situation when patients resort to cannabis, and are forced to grow it themselves because of the legal and economic situation. In our neighboring countries, in the Czech Republic and in Holland, it has been decriminalized 5 years ago already. So perhaps you will only be punished with an administrative offense of perhaps €100 if you grow 5 plants at home. Why is that not the case in Germany? Why is this being blocked here? It makes no sense. Every patient who is able and willing should create his own medicine. And this applies not only to cannabis, but also to the procurement of medicines that have been withdrawn from the market in Germany. Also, they can be bought in the nearest pharmacy, the Czech Republic, in Denmark, in our neighboring countries. Yes, for little money. They are criminalized here in Germany if I import them. And as a scientist, I am convinced that cancer can only be treated and cured with a strategy that is multifaceted, that regulates cancer from different directions. There are also other drugs on the market that can kill cancer cells without causing major collateral damage, but they have disappeared from the market again, and I believe that you should select all drugs that have a strategic advantage against cancer without causing major collateral damage or endangering life, and to combine all these strategies. There are many drugs that have been known for a long time, have been on the market for 50 years, are cheap because they are no longer patent-protected drugs and are available on the market as generic drugs at a ridiculously low price. During our research, we noticed a drug which was described in a scientific publication, and the application in a patient with a tumor in the liver, which was a large metastasis of an eye melanoma. And after several months of daily intake of disulfiram together with zinc, this tumor has largely disappeared. The anti-alcoholism drug disulfiram reacts with zinc and copper ions and can thus selectively kill tumor cells. In this case, it saved the patient's life because only this drug, which had been on the market in Germany since 1948, was used. When more and more publications appeared describing the anti-cancer effect of disulfiram on various types of cancer, the drug was withdrawn from the German market in 2011, allegedly because the manufacturer cannot generate sufficient profit on the market at a cost of around 80 cents per pill. However, disulfiram is currently still available in pharmacies in other countries, such as Denmark and Switzerland, as well as almost everywhere else in the world. For example, in Prague, it costs just 65 cents per pill in the online pharmacy. Cancer cells can also be killed with this well-known drug. In Germany, 1 tablet of mebendazole on prescription costs about €350. In the Czech Republic, only about €180. But what happened in the United States when it became more and more known by publications that this standard medicine against worm infections can kill cancer cells, they see now.
The price for the prescription to cure these different types of worms used to cost you $3 a pill here in the United States. Now it'll cost you between $500 and $600 for that very same pill. Doctors and patients are angry and both want answers.
Dr. Simone Soleimani treats a lot of kids at Abyssina Medical, and therefore he sees a decent amount with worms, mostly pinworms. That's the most common type of intestinal worm infection. The treatment is easy, 1 little pill, and they're usually gone. So when he prescribed it this week, he was shocked.
The pharmacy called me about an hour later saying the treatment is about $1,800. and it's not covered by pretty much any insurance company.
Prices for the drug mebendazole that goes under the brand name Enverm multiplied seemingly overnight.
I literally had to ask twice. I'm like, you must be joking.
It's not a joke. It's something pharmacist Gary Roberts sees happen a lot.
The end loser is the patient.
Roberts says prices usually spike because of supply and demand or research and development. But in some cases, he says prices multiply because there's nothing stopping these companies from charging what they want.
How much profit is too much profit? And that's the question that needs to be asked.
While there are new steps from President Donald Trump's administration to prevent steep increases in drug prices, right now it's perfectly legal, and there are no regulations in place to stop companies from naming their price. Mebendazole is just one price hike example, but in this case, there could be a specific reason. Mebendazole could help fight cancer.
As soon as there was some data that potentially this class of medication can have anti-cancer benefits, that's where literally the sale happened and the prices went up 40,000%, you know. So they have to be linked.
Dr. Soleimani is referring to clinical trials at Johns Hopkins University. By accident, mebendazole was found to possibly stop brain cancer in mice. Back in 2012, research began to try and prove mebendazole could stop cancer. In 2015, Impact's laboratories acquired all the rights to the drug. When we asked why the price is so high, Impact spokesman Mark Donahue had only this response. Enverm, again the name brand for mebendazole, is the only FDA-approved prescription treatment for pinworm, with a 95% cure rate in a single tablet. Donahue said that he couldn't comment on the cancer research.
When a medication's been around for 40, 50 years, and that's available everywhere else for pennies on the dollar, and you suddenly charge $500 a pill for because you found the new benefit, it just looks kind of unethical.
All I can say is, it's about people, and it makes me want to poke. The question arises as to whether the use of warm drugs in humans can also lead to the disappearance of cancer. In the search for such patients, I come across cases on the internet that have already successfully turned their tumors around with anti-worm drugs, even to the point of full remission. Also, conventional medicine with typical chemotherapy and radiation therapy, as well as operations, had already failed and further metastasis could not be stopped. I found such a case via internet in the United States. An elderly man who has suffered from the particularly malignant small cell lung cancer, and his skull was full of metastases. He not only treated himself with cannabis extracts, but also combined an anti-worm agent with vitamins and curcumin. It is noteworthy that the patient had treated himself with an animal anti-worm agent, the so-called fenbendazole, which is very similar to mebendazole and also very cheap in the world. Joe had turned his almost deadly lung cancer through this cocktail strategy to full remission, thanks to a tip from his vet for a dog treatment. There has also been extensive scientific research into how mebendazole and the veterinary fenbendazole attack cancer cells.
Joe Tippin says it did save his life and others, and now even cancer researchers are open to the possibility it might be true.
My neck, my liver, my pancreas, my bladder, in my bones, it was everywhere.
2 years ago, Joe Tippin says he was told to go home, call hospice, and say his goodbyes. The doctors were unanimous. He was going to die of small cell lung cancer.
Once that kind of cancer goes that far afield, the odds of survival are less than 1%, and the median life expectancy is 3 months.
Tippin says he went from 220 pounds to 110, but that was January of 2017. Today, Tippins is very much alive, and what he credits for his survival has doctors scratching their heads and the rest of us raising eyebrows.
About half the people think I'm just crazy, and half the people want to know more and dig deeper.
Tippins says he got a tip, not from a pharmacist, but a veterinarian. And in his desperation, he turned from people medicine to dog medicine, specifically fembendazole, or what you give a dog when it has worms.
Truth is stranger than fiction, you know.
Just 3 months later, Tippins says his cancer was gone.
I'm usually skeptical, and I was and maybe still am about this one. But there's an interesting background to this.
Cancer researchers like Stephen Prescott are skeptical, but they also are not dismissing this anti-parasitic's potential. He says Tippins is not the first person to potentially benefit, and maybe not the last.
Scientists at many credible places have done work on this for years.
But was it the dog dewormer, or was it something else? Tippins took the dog medicine with daily vitamin E supplements and CBD oil. He was also taking an experimental cancer-fighting drug. But Tippins says out of the 1,100 patients on that clinical trial, he was the only one cleared of cancer. Tippins says he was saved by the dog dewormer, and he plans to take it for the rest of his life.
Well, my insurance company spent $1.2 million on me with traditional means before I switched to a $5 a week medicine that actually saved me.
Prescott says he's now working with Tippins to organize a case study.
We're going to do it and see if we can confirm that in a very rigorous or a clinical study sort of way that these patients had that kind of response.
As for Tippins,
I've got now over 40 success stories other than me.
He's sharing his story on an online blog that has already been read more than 100,000 times. Most of the feedback positive or curious. Some, though, accuse Tippins of giving cancer patients false hope.
How do I answer that? I mean, if I've saved one other person other than me, it's worth it to me.
All we know for sure is that Joe Tippins is alive. In time, perhaps we'll also know if this medicine made for man's best friend might also be man's newest cancer cure.
But there are other well-known cheap drugs for a cocktail strategy against cancer. For example, another well-known anti-worm drug, niclosamide, which has a killing effect on cancer cells mutated to the p53 gene, and in 50% of all tumor cells, the genome guard gene, the p53, is defective. Elephants, same as humans, have lifespans around 70 years or more, but they have 100 times more cells than humans, and their cells rarely mutated to cancer. Only less than 5% of known elephant deaths are related to cancer. But for humans, cancer-related death is up to 25%. Scientists have found that elephants have 20 copies of the gene called TP53, which acts as a genome guardian and suppresses tumor development. Humans, on the other hand, have only one TP53 gene, partly from their parents. Favorable standard drugs can have a serious effect on the metabolism of cancer cells.
Monique Borghese, who traveled to Long Beach from Brazil, is one of those patients. Almost 4 years ago, she was diagnosed with a large tumor near her kidney called an adrenocortical carcinoma.
This is a very aggressive and rare tumor.
By the time Monique met Dr. Nagorny, she'd already had surgery and chemotherapy, but the cancer had come back and was growing in her lung.
Basically a death sentence.
Just 26 years old, Monique was withering away.
I wasn't sure she was treatable.
To learn more about Monique's cancer, Dr. Nagorny needed a piece of her tumor. That meant surgery. Once the sample arrived in the lab, it was chopped up into dozens of tiny samples. Those samples were then treated with a variety of drugs to see which, if any, could kill her cancer cells in the lab. Some of Monique's tumor cells were treated with the harshest cancer killers on the market.
Cisplatin and Taxol didn't work.
Others were treated with drugs far milder. The drug that killed Monique's cancer, better than anything, turned out not to be a cancer drug at all, but rather a common diabetes drug called metformin.
These drugs don't know what diseases they were invented for.
3 months after starting metformin in 2015, Monique got a CAT scan. Her doctor in Brazil gave her the news. While her post-chemo hair was growing back, her lung tumors were was shrinking.
It was a miracle.
Between their in-person visits, Monique and Dr. Nagurney have stayed in touch via Skype.
You're still taking metformin, yes?
Yes.
And your life is normal?
Yes, normal. I breathe perfect.
Why even try a diabetes drug on Monique's cancer?
What metformin is and does is an energy drug. It doesn't stop cells from dividing. It influences their ability to make and use energy. Once we stopped that, her cancers died.
Last month, Monique returned to Long Beach for a 3-year check-in.
What's this hair you grew?
Yes.
3 years after starting metformin, the drug is still working. And 4 years after being told she was terminal,
I'm here, I'm fine, and I'm so thankful.
I don't know that I've cured Monique, but I know that Monique is well and alive.
I love my life. I love to live. I want to live a lot of years, many years.
Dr. Nagurney is now investigating what Monique's experience could mean for other patients.
Going after cancer cells at the level of metabolism, at the level that they make and use energy, is a fundamental change in our thinking.
There are different kinds of brain tumors. It's important to discriminate between primary brain cancer, which is a tumor that's born in the brain, and that's actually pretty rare. And then there's metastatic brain cancer, which is 5 times more common. Part of what makes cancer cancer is that it has the ability to spread throughout the body. So the tumor might start in the breast and it gets to a certain size and it develops some mutations, and then the cell will split off, get into the blood, and then stop somewhere in the brain and deposit inside the brain and form other tumors. And that would be the process of metastasizing.
There is a blood-brain barrier, and that barrier works very well at keeping toxins and infections and other things floating around through our blood out of the brain. But cancer has developed a mechanism which it can penetrate that barrier. And certain cancers in particular are better at penetrating it than others, which is why we tend to see most metastatic tumors from lung cancer, breast cancer, melanoma, and testicular cancer. If you remove one of these metastatic tumors from the brain with surgery and you look at it under a microscope, it looks like the cancer from the original source. So a breast cancer metastasis looks like abnormal breast tissue rather than brain tissue. They're growing into a ball of cells that is the cancer, but they're not incorporating themselves into the brain. They're unwanted neighbors, if you will.
Our goal is to find those tumors early, because as the tumors get bigger, the success rates drop.
Each time the cancer cells divide, more mutations build up in their genomes. Because different parts of the tumour acquire different mutations, they behave differently. Sometimes one region of the tumour will grow faster and more aggressively than the others, causing the cancer to spread.
I was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of breast cancer in September in 2012. That was treated with 17 months worth of treatment, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, immunotherapy. In September 2015, I was very unwell and I was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, which is stage 4, not curable, lungs, liver. And in January 2017, I was diagnosed with 12 brain tumours. Now that was the most devastating part of my entire life, and I thought, that's it, it's curtains for me, because basically once it's spread to the brain, breast cancer is, the prognosis is not good and treatments don't work so well. I get off-label drugs. Now these drugs are repurposed. They're normally used for things like diabetes, treating worms, antibiotics, but these can help to slow the metabolism of cancer down. And they work pretty much by, the metformin reduces the amount of insulin in the blood, so that helps to starve the cancer and changes the way it metabolises. And it also, metformin also affects stem cells. Now stem cells are what proliferate and grow to grow new tumours, and a lot of chemos don't sort of affect the stem cells, so they get rid of the tumours, but you still got these stem cells going around, and these stem cells then develop again, so the cancer keeps coming back. So that obviously will help with that. Then the mebendazole, that helps with angiogenesis, the formation of the new blood vessels. So that is another way in which it attacks the cancer. And the antibiotics and then the statins as well, they all have a different effect on the growth cycles and metabolism of the cancer. These drugs will work on all cancers. The research is looking good. There's lots of research ongoing, but unfortunately there's not enough for it to be included in cancer care at the moment. It might be included in the future, but it's not included yet. Well, I ain't waiting till the future because I want a future. So I decided to go and get these drugs. The consultation was about £300. The drugs are about £60 for 3 months. It's an absolute bargain, I think, it's keeping me well. Admittedly, I have had a few problems with chemotherapy it was very toxic for me. So I think attacking cancer from all areas is the way to do it. And I just think the more the merrier, because it's multifaceted, and just hitting it with one drug or one treatment doesn't necessarily work. I think there's a lot of things involved: healthy lifestyle, losing weight, then attacking it from different angles with drugs. But obviously in hospitals they can only give you one drug at a time because they want to see what's working and what's not working, or when I say one drug at a time, they might not give too many different treatments at a time. But they weren't that happy that I was going to Harley Street originally, but something's working really well for me because I've outlived now my expected sort of time, if you like. And as you can see, I'm not looking too bad really at the moment.
I didn't want to live anymore because it was just uncertain. I didn't know if I was going to live ill for the next 5 years or if I was just going to drop down dead the next day.
Darren was diagnosed with leukemia in 2010 at the age of 10. About 18 months later, he developed another cancer called Langerhans cell sarcoma, which developed in his tonsils. He was dubbed the boy in 7 billion, being the only boy in the world to have the two cancers together. We were told that he was literally living on antibiotics. It's the only thing keeping him alive. So when I asked them, well, when we take him off this conscious life support machine, and how long are we talking? To which I was told 3 days, a week at most. When do you want to go to the hospice?
Yeah, when I went to the hospice, I decided to start planning my own funeral.
Darren's mental health actually deteriorated incredibly to the point where he tried to kill himself. I had nothing more to lose. You know, the next step for me was burying my son, and I was absolutely hesitant about using cannabis. I knew the consequences of giving it to him, but at the point that I administered cannabis to him, none of that mattered. I was willing to face 14 years, every single day of a 14-year sentence, just to give him the alleviation that it gave him.
It sort of just relaxed my mental traffic. Loads of stuff was going on in my head all the time. It just shut that up.
He wasn't crying anymore. His pain had gone away, and he was no longer anxious and no longer upset, and just chilled out. And I thought, wow, you know, if it can do that and we can have him die in this way, then that's more than I ever wanted. That's more than I could ever hope for. His immune system had kicked in, and this was day 75, and he officially engrafted on day 104. I even asked the question, you know, was there anything you gave him that could have done this? And they told me no, there was no way. This was a miracle. So there's one thing reading about it, there's another thing seeing a miracle in front of your own eyes, but then seeing it with loads of other people and knowing it's not a one-off and seeing it work so effectively for so many people is why I'm so passionate about stopping prohibition, because prohibition has caused more harm than cannabis ever could. There is something fundamentally wrong in this country when people are criminalised and deemed as criminals for doing nothing more than alleviating their own suffering.
My name is Hope Stringer. I'm 27 years old, and in December 2014 I was diagnosed with a rare form of sarcoma. It presented as 2 tumours in my neck. I had surgery followed by chemotherapy, lots of radiotherapy, and unfortunately a new tumour grew back straight away, which I then followed up with more surgery and more radiotherapy. And 3 years went by and I've been in remission, but unfortunately in December 2018, just gone, I found out that it's actually come back and has spread this time to my lungs. The disease is now technically considered incurable. have 11 tumours, and the biggest one I think is just over 2 centimetres, and the rest are small ones.
All in the lung?
Yeah, all in the lung.
Okay.
And the lymph nodes as well.
Okay.
So this time I've decided to go think outside the box and go for more non-conventional treatments, alternative and natural stuff. But yeah, so at the moment I'm taking quite a high dose of CBD and THC oil, with some other repurposed drugs. Yeah, phenmendazole and menbendazole, as well as disulfiram, doxycycline, and lots of natural, not natural plant extracts, curcumin, vitamin E, magnolia extract. I feel great at the moment because I've got no side effects and it's all natural, and I believe that by going down the natural path, started all of this new regime. I've had one scan since which shows that there's been no growth, so as it stands things are stable, so the next scan we're hoping for some shrinkage.
Okay.
Not great really with any other treatment options because they haven't really been proven to work, and they do have some risks involved, so yeah, my favourable option is the natural path. I'm 100% convinced that this is a possible treatment option. Obviously it's not a cure because otherwise everyone would do it and there would be no people dying from cancer anymore, but I do genuinely believe that this is an option and the best way. We're so lucky in this day and age that we live in that there is so much on the internet. Like, I feel sorry for people years ago because there is just you have to listen to what your doctor says if you didn't have the internet.
Yeah.
So thank God we have the internet now.
Yeah. So the internet is like a swarm intelligence.
Yeah.
And all the anecdotal cases in the world give a good feeling to try.
Yeah, definitely. Without when I first got re-diagnosed with the metastasized disease, I left the doctor's surgery thinking I'm going to die like very quickly because all he was offering me was a chemo that he told me doesn't work, and he said that's literally all we can do. But thankfully, after meeting so many different people and talking to other people, that's not true, and there is a lot that can be done. This is one day so far. I've already taken my morning ones and the first thing on the empty stomach, and that's just some of them. And then when I go home, I'll take my CBD and THC oil. As well as that, I'll be doing lots of juicing of just green vegetables, broccoli, kale, spinach. I do lots of yoga every day. Yeah, that's been a big part of my healing journey. As well as I meditate every day.
You try the whole available.
Yeah, the dream is to be healthy again, and hopefully go on to help other people see the natural ways.
All the business that exists around the cancer is, of course, questionable. It's about earning money that is actually legitimate. Our society is structured in this way. In this particular case, it is morally questionable because, of course, money is earned with the suffering of other people. And the healing is always a topic during the treatment, but one has the feeling that is not always in the foreground. But that partly the making money is more important than the healing of the patient. And to see that is actually the code of the system makes very clear. There are many examples of highly effective drugs being taken off the market where, for example, patent protection has expired, simply because there is no money to be made. It is inexplicable.
Even if she wasn't having a seizure we could see, she was having constant epileptic seizure activity in her brain.
Called subclinical seizures. Because of the frequency, these are the ones that could cause brain damage. They did CT scans right away, and the results of the EEGs were alarming.
Almost constant subclinical seizure activity, which means there was basically, in layman's terms, misfiring going on all the time.
She was on 9 different medications.
Kept hoping the next one would work, the next one would work.
Despite all of her doctor's efforts, none improved the subclinical activity.
Can I get a hug?
At the age of 2, Gwenny was developmentally stuck at a 4-month-old level. Alex, not to mention, specifically trying to dose an inhalation would be pretty hard.
It's a fat-soluble substance, so you can make it into an oil-based extract concentrate.
For Alex, there was a lot of trial and error.
It was difficult to navigate, and at first it was illegal to make it into the oil, to administer it and dose it and titrate it to her. So last January she'd been on cannabis oil for 5 weeks, and we didn't see a seizure for 5 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, no seizures, and then we went for an EEG and it showed no epileptic activity. I was like, wow, like this is the first thing that actually helped her.
A great moment for the Rapetskis. Gwenny was starting to show signs of improvement.
She was happier, she was becoming ticklish.
They went to go see her doctor and discuss her latest EEG.
They couldn't believe it, that there was no epileptic activity on the EEG. So I gave the doctor a hug. Is he yummy? The fact that we're not scared that she's constantly having a seizure has been amazing for us, because whereas my wife would be up all night watching the monitor or sleeping in her bed or having her in our bed, just waiting for that seizure, we don't have to do that anymore. Her brother Damien is now experiencing somewhat of a normal sibling relationship.
Alex knows this is in no way a cure for her, and she still has many challenges to face, but the bottom line is she's been seizure-free for over a year, and her quality of life has increased.
She's having fun, and she's developing, and her quality of life has improved incredibly dramatically, which improves everyone in the family's quality of life. What's needed is research and education, and for us to have an open dialogue about cannabis, cannabis oil, what it's doing, how it's working.
Cannabis.
The legalization of narcotics is a hotly debated topic. Some are in favor of legal use, some against, and still others have no other choice, including Magda Zabelka from Offenbach, who has fought ADHD, asthma and life-threatening epileptic seizures since her use. The young woman has already tried a lot to get her complaints under control. I used to take up 20 different medications. They had very strong side effects, and now I treat all my diseases only with cannabis. In contrast to other medicines, cannabis has finally had an effect against the diseases. Moreover, Magda is completely free of seizures due to cannabis. So, without the cannabis, I would probably get asthma attacks after a short time. After a few hours and after several days, I would probably have another epileptic seizure. These were so difficult for me that I was absent for several days in the so-called epileptic status, and theoretically one could also die of it. Not an easy situation for the small family. Her medical cannabis Magda had to get so far from the pharmacy. Actually, no problem, because the health insurance should take over the therapy. In order for the treatment to be paid for, a whole series of applications must be made and examined. And this can take time. For half the cannabis patients, there are big problems with the health insurances, as long as the patients have to pay for their cannabis themselves. In total, Magda would have to invest about 3,000 euros in cannabis every month, and that only to lead a halfway pain-free life. For Magda and her boyfriend Heiko Hartnagel not to lift. Then it becomes twice as expensive. So, instead of 12 euro, it costs 20 euro now, and quality deficiencies have unfortunately already occurred and cannot even be complained about. So, somehow, it is a catastrophe. Only way out is self-growing. That violates, however, against the narcotics law. The police didn't have to wait long for that. According to his partner Heiko, the police broke open the front door by force and handcuffed his sick father on the floor. During the police search of the house, all medication was confiscated and Heiko was arrested. A nightmare. Heiko had to stay in custody for 3 weeks and Magda without medication. At the end, however, nothing could be proven against him. It is also bad if you have a woman who is ill, who has a disease that her first daughter died of a good year ago, and then you will be prosecuted for having this disease in the end. That takes you with it, because I was in prison for 3 weeks until that was cleared up in the end. I was worried sick. Luckily, my mother was with Magda the whole time, but I knew that Magda's medication had been confiscated and she could have an epileptic seizure at any moment, and I am not there. Since they now take cannabis regularly, they have not had any epileptic seizures. Not a single epileptic seizure, not a single asthma seizure. I have stopped all other medications. I just noticed that, by the way, where I had the epilepsy. Then I applied for the exemption and noticed that it helped against asthma. I couldn't believe it at first, but I simply noticed that I didn't need any more medications. So they had the exemption to be allowed to buy cannabis in the pharmacy because of the epilepsy? Because of the epilepsy, I had dealt with it myself, but had got it because of the ADHD, because it was because of the epilepsy had been treated, because all stimulants triggered epileptic seizures in me. Actually, no doctor can take the risk of the expensive cannabis treatment. It's very expensive. Especially if someone needs as much as they do now, 2 to 4 grams a day, then that's 2,000 euros a month. And now comes the decisive factor that makes it impossible to prescribe cannabis on prescription. In addition, they have to observe the economic efficiency requirement according to Section 12 of the Social Code. We expressly reserve the right to examine the medical necessity and economic efficiency. And the examination does not come then because one has particularly high medicament costs, now because of a patient, but because one exceeds because of all medications which one prescribed in the course of a quarter a certain percentage. This is 50% of the average prescription of the other doctors, so all doctors have 100%, and if a single doctor is 50% above it, then he comes into the performance audit, no matter what that has been, whether the cannabis or something else has been. And if a doctor has 3, 4 or 5 patients who need 100 grams of cannabis a month, then he quickly 50% above average and comes into the performance audit. And you don't know how it ends. This can turn out well if the health insurance companies remember that they actually approved the therapy, but maybe they don't remember it either. And that's why I'm actually in favor of decriminalizing cannabis completely, so that it won't be penalized anymore, so that everyone can grow their own medicinal plants. He can also grow his own thyme or lavender, for example, as calming tea or thyme for bronchitis. And why shouldn't this also be the case with the best of all medicinal plants? The doctor has prescribed cannabis flowers. We have packed it in a child-proof container. He ordered them to do so at the expense of the health insurance company. They will nevertheless now receive a copy of this regulation from me, because it entitles them or identifies them as the authorized owner of this cannabis. Yes, somehow it should be from the law. If the doctor says that you need it and that there are no alternatives, that you get it. And then not that anyone comes along and someone who has no idea at all and then decides whether they need it then or not, and then these injustices arise. Because the law is simply not observed as it should be. I am also of the opinion that one should get it with every diagnosis, no matter how bad the illness is. I think you have to see it from two sides. First of all, from the medicinal point of view, which benefits the patient, and from the financial prescriptiveness. That is what the health insurance pays for, what the health insurance companies have in their obligation to pay. The only thing they have in their obligation to pay is these indications, for which approval has also been worked out. And the health insurance funds sometimes find it difficult to recognize the off-label indication. So if the doctor now says, for example, that this medicine, which is actually approved for something else, I would now like to use for this disease, there is no application on the part of the health insurance funds to provide benefits, and yet it is perhaps sensible to us to use this medicine for certain illnesses. And then it is an agreement between doctor and patient whether or not to prescribe the medicine on a private prescription. Then this approval problem is bypassed. This financial problem, then the health insurance fund is no longer obliged. And the patient may have inquired himself about this medicine, can help with my illness. And he then wants the prescription, and then the doctor should, even if he can take responsibility for it from the medicinal point of view, that is, from the spectrum of side effects, from the risks that a medicine may also bring, then he should nevertheless prescribe it. As a prescribing doctor, I think I am then fully at risk. I have to have it certified by the patient and also have it signed that he wants to have it prescribed off-label at his own request. If I now respect the dignity and autonomy of the patient, I will do so. Then I will respond to the wish. In my opinion, every doctor should do it. Of course, always after weighing up how great the risk is. If you now address cannabis, let's say cannabis for cancer, cannabis is almost unbeatable. Yes, it always improves the quality of life. It improves the mood. Why shouldn't one help the patient to improve his quality of life with the help of cannabis? And I think that through his indirect effect, that he simply feels better, that his immune system can also work better, that it also has an effect on cancer now. That is, develops more slowly, or perhaps even regresses. The politicians are convinced that they are making better laws, and laws that are also to the advantage and in the interest of the sick patients. And not some interest groups are protected by laws that can then make a profit again through drugs, because, in my opinion, this is a human right. Mrs. Zabelka, 2 weeks ago I had here a house search. There was the police here, there was a public prosecutor here, and a pharmacist of the Regional Council Darmstadt, and there were IT specialists there. And because of their situation, or because of their criminal proceedings, I am now also suspected of having misused cannabis prescriptions. And what I actually find very problematic, so they not only took their patient files with them, but they even took the patient files of all my cannabis patients with them. So I am of the opinion that the regional presidium or the public prosecutor's office in Darmstadt is taking a very long step, that I am now under general suspicion and that all patient data are now disclosed before the public prosecutor's office and the court in Darmstadt, which of course also violates my relationship of trust with the patients. So I could not protect the patient's data with the patient secrets and disease secrets from this access. There was an order from the district court of Darmstadt, and I had no chance to defend myself against it. It is incredible that patient data can be confiscated easily. I have seen such an expert opinion in my files, in my investigation procedure. I already suspected something like that it could come to such a search, yes, of the Regional Council Darmstadt, of the Dr. Kurz, where really every word is wrong. So everything he is accusing of, all the accusations are, in my opinion, and I know the law pretty well, just assertions that are simply not true.
Ich kenne mich eigentlich ziemlich gut aus mit dem Gesetz und dem ganzen Drumherum und das sind einfach Sachen, wo behauptet, die wo nicht stimmen.
Mrs. Zabelka, I have the impression that this action, which has been initiated against me by the Public Prosecutor's Office in Darmstadt, is intended to create fear among possible doctors, potential doctors who may be prepared to prescribe cannabis, already doing and practicing it. And from the point of view of what has now happened, one must also consider the practicability of the law, the German cannabis law of 2017. After all, it was the case that all members of the parliament who were in the parliament at the time voted unanimously for this law. On the one hand, practicability is hampered by the fact that up to 95% of doctors are still not prepared to prescribe cannabis. The doctors too often reject this. The politicians voted for it, and there is still a discrepancy between the legislature. So the parliament was in favor, but now other institutions of the separation of powers, so the Public Prosecutor's Office, the jurisdiction and the Regional Council come as executive. They are now trying to put obstacles in the way of doctors who are willing to prescribe cannabis by trying to prove their mistakes. One must also recall the number of patients. So we have managed on the part of the doctors to fill out the cannabis cost reimbursement application and support about 26,000 patients in 2 years. The health insurance company pays for it and estimates perhaps the same number of patients again, or perhaps twice the number of patients who have had cannabis prescribed on private prescription by private doctors. If we now consider the total number of 8 million people in Germany who, I estimate, would benefit from cannabis as a medicine, then that is a drop in the ocean. So it would take several hundred years for all patients to be treated if the doctors were still prepared to support patients to such a small extent. Everything that nature gives us, all gifts of good from nature, should actually be freely available to all people, and no state should go there and put a stop to it. So now we have the situation that now quite a lot of pressure has arisen now against me, and if now other doctors find out about it, they will of course also be intimidated. Nevertheless, I think that the law that the members of the German parliament passed 2 years ago, that it is a good thing, that it has promoted the development of treatment for cannabis for patients, and I think that this situation should now be used to go further to that all patients who could benefit from cannabis could really benefit from it. We also finally have the benefit of being able to use this medicinal plant so that it no longer needs to be treated with medicines that are full of side effects, which in terms of the medicalization of society result in the prescription of other medicines, namely to treat the side effects. We undertake a diving trip not far from Chania. For us, the seas are like a pharmacological supermarket. Below us, there are rocks that are covered with the brown macroalgae, swarms of little dark monkfish around us. The Aegean Islands offer many traditional natural remedies. These funnel algae, called Patina pavonica, which can be found all over the Mediterranean Sea, contain many substances, including fucoidan and fucoxanthin, both of which have anti-inflammatory and anti-cancer cell effects. My interest here is in sea cucumbers. These animals live without a brain, but with a hungry digestive tract. They feed mainly on organic material on the seabed. To a certain extent, they roll themselves through the dirt of the seas as blind garbage chutes. They have a simple nervous system and also an endocannabinoid system. What fascinates me so much about the rustic little animals is the fact that various substances from sea cucumbers have strong anti-inflammatory and anti-tumor effects, like the frondocytes. Within a few weeks, some sea cucumber species can rebuild their lost innards from stem cells. These genetic regulatory mechanisms are of great interest for cancer research. Sea cucumbers contain substances to regulate the regeneration of organ damage and even entire organs, which have been withheld from us humans by evolution or have been lost again. But the new formation of whole body parts and organs is also known and well researched in much more highly developed animals, such as newts, amphibians and salamanders, which can not only regenerate whole body parts and organs in case of injury and loss, but can even reform their eye lenses. The Mexican tail atrium, called axolotl, can even regenerate entire areas of his brain and spine, including the spinal cord, during injuries. Intensive international research is carried out on the axolotl. In the meantime, the axolotl genome has been completely deciphered, and it has been astonishingly found that its genome contains 10 times more base pairs than that of humans, with approximately 3 billion base pairs, because many gene segments occur repeatedly. Axolotl has unsurpassed wound healing and is much more resistant to cancer than humans, but not fully immune, especially to melanoma. 4 years, research has been carried out into how it is possible for extracts from axolotl oocytes to act on human breast cancer cells in such a way that they return to normal. Also, this has only been done in the test tube to date. Axolotl soup and powder used to be a traditional remedy in Mexico. If we better understand the genetic regulatory mechanisms behind it, science could provide the key to the cure of cancer in the future.
The beauty of this animal is that it doesn't matter how many times you cut its leg off, it will regenerate perfectly. If it loses its arm, it will regenerate it and you won't even be able to tell later on. Cells will divide to eliminate any discontinuity between themselves and their neighbors. And so if you have two cells that aren't normally next to each other, then they will insert what should be in between. The way we think about it is that the cells have positional information. What we've described it as is along this axis, the information, we describe this with alphabet, A through whatever. And around the circumference is 12 through 1. If you put a 12 and a 6 next to each other, what they do is they fill in and it creates another whole limb. Where you make a wound here, you have to deviate a nerve to the site and then graft a piece of skin from another part of the circumference with an opposite positional value. If you do this, you've created a big discontinuity right there, and so you will get another hand in there to eliminate it. Regeneration is something that all animals make some attempt at, even us. But it must be that in these animals that regenerate, they keep the information that they used to build the structures in the first place, they keep it accessible, whereas we've turned it off. I think what it is these animals, because they regenerate, they maintain a strong grid, what we call the information grid. And the information grid works to fill in gaps, but it doesn't go crazy and make extra stuff. I think the difference is humans had that strong grid as embryos, and then we just maintain the integrity of what was made at that time, but we don't have the ability to recreate later on. We started out with some of the same abilities, but we lose it very fast. What we need to do is we need to know more about what happens in other animals before we go to humans. Other animals that don't normally regenerate, that we can stimulate to regenerate and then see, what happens to them.
The Aegean Sea offers yet another living being which fascinates me for oncology research. A jellyfish, only 5 mm small, with the ability to live on infinitely, to be virtually, biologically immortal. Her name is Turritopsis dornii. In this medusa, cells of the outer screen can become the germ of a new polyp through transdifferentiation. This creates a new generation of polyps that emerges directly from the medusa and is genetically identical to it. This species is thus the first known case of a multicellular organism in which the sexually mature individual regresses to a sexually immature life form. In this way, an individual can go through the entire life cycle again and again and theoretically achieve immortality.
Nature is the largest pharmacy in the world.
Back in the mountains of Crete, Simone explores very special plants, like this special pistachia tree, Pistacia lentiscus, also called mastic bush. The mastic trees, cultivated mainly on the Greek islands of Chios, form a resin in their bark similar to incense from Oman. The essential oil of this resin contains terpenes, which can also act against cancer cells. Simone comes to a tree with passion flowers. To us, the fruits, they are berries, of the passion flower trees are also known as maracuja. Furthermore, mountain sarch and cardamom can still be seen here. The fruits of prickly pears, Opuntia ficus indica, produce carotenoids similar to brown algae and are being studied for their effects on neurodegenerative diseases and cancer. On Crete, we experience the harvest of the olives. The native oil obtained from the olives is of great importance as a component of the Mediterranean diet and contains the active ingredient oleosantal, which can also unfold anti-cancer cell effects. The Mediterranean diet, with lots of salads, vegetables, fruits and seafish, as well as virgin olive oil and many herbs and spices, are the basis for a solid gut biome and immune system. When a cytotoxic T cell finds a cancer cell, membrane protrusions rapidly explore the surface of the cell, checking for the sign of cancer. They kill then their targets using poisonous proteins visible here in red. The cytotoxic granules move down special path routes in the cell called microtubules to the interface between the T cell and the cancer cell. The T cell punctures the surface of cancer cell and delivers its deadly cytotoxins. The fate of the cancer cell is sealed. The T cell then moves on, hungry to find another victim. On the markets of Crete, fruits and vegetables are very extensive and cheap to get for a healthy Mediterranean diet. Simone loves to buy on the market in Chania for her own juice production, especially what is offered by local organic farmers. Whenever possible, fresh juice is made despite boat life, and also our sailor friends are tasted with fresh vegetable juice. The two Danish sailors, as married couple with their catamaran next to our eagle, have become friends of ours. Mie want Simone again to decide a final solution for her tumor problem in the eye.
A hard-working day in paradise.
It's Mariana and Helena, and they want to say hello.
We have crossing the Atlantic 3 times. We love the Atlantic. We have everything out there.
Cheers, it's for you because
Nice to meet you.
a little bit like my girlfriend and my mom.
Well, we are like that. Cheers.
Cheers, and a good healthy for a long life.
For you too.
Thank you.
I wish you the best.
Me
I want
too.
your eye fixed.
Yes.
Unfortunately, about a year later, a tragic accident happened to the skipper of the catamaran. They sailed back across the Atlantic to the Caribbean. But on a night cruise, the old skipper fell overboard somewhere off the island of Guadeloupe. The next day, the Coast Guard found him floating dead in the sea. Despite all the risks, island worlds offer us paradisical conditions, and you don't have to go to the Caribbean to find the ultimate dream beach. We find this with our boat before the lagoon of Palos on the peninsula Gramvosa on Crete. The most beautiful beach we have ever experienced is and remains the bay and lagoon of Palos. The steep mountains so close to the lagoon are even more impressive than in Elafonisi Beach. This is where all our Mediterranean dreams come true. The lagoon offers a breathtaking scenery with steep mountains, warm water, finest powder sand, beach colors in all pastel shades. As beautiful as the lagoon is, man unfortunately also left his dirty traces here. Several ships were damaged in the past at Grambusa, and there were some oil spills, the traces of which can still be found. Simone loves bathing in the warm water of the lagoon, and especially in the sea in front of the lagoon, where the colors enchant you. We anchored in front of the Venetian fortress on Imeri and stayed there several times in the bay, when one morning a super mega yacht anchored near our eagle. It was the Vava II of the Swiss pharmaceutical billionaire Ernesto Bertorelli. His 100-meter luxury yacht cost Bertorelli over 100 million euros. His family had created great wealth when his father was founder of the Swiss pharmaceutical and biotech company Serono, which made many billions of dollars in profit from hormone preparations against infertility and multiple sclerosis. I realize that natural substances and their applications should never be patentable and should always be freely accessible. I want to look at the differences between the underwater habitats of the Aegean and the Red Sea, and so we fly to Egypt without further ado while our sailing yacht stays on Crete. There are beautiful coral reefs around Zafaga and the Red Sea, which I now take a closer look at. We see the poisonous lionfish and pufferfish now conquering the Mediterranean. Pufferfish have the strongest poison of all fish in their skin. The tetrodotoxin is also quite deadly for humans. When we heard about the first lionfish discovered in the south of Crete, we realized what the Mediterranean was going to be like, an existential threat to the native fry from foreign predators, so-called fish invaders, such as lionfish and pufferfish. But they will come more and more to the west, because they have no serious predators in the Mediterranean Sea and are always often seen off the Mediterranean coast of Turkey. Amazing that the fish of the coral seas, which actually love warm water, can survive and spread in the much cooler Mediterranean. For me, coral gardens with their immense flora and fauna are a possible source of as yet unknown natural substances for medicine. For example, in the highly poisonous eggs of a certain snail, a toxin with unimaginably strong power against tumor cells was found. Our mission is to find substances from the ocean that only have a cytotoxic effect on cancer cells and do not kill healthy cells. But mostly the poisons from the coral world are so highly toxic that they are too problematic for medicine. I am more interested in the question of what substances kill cancer cells but only have a positive healing effect on the entire human system, without poisoning and causing collateral damage as with chemotoxins. After the empty Mediterranean Sea disappointed me while diving, here in the reefs before Zafaga, the coral world seems to be still in order. Not least because spearfishing is unfortunately permitted in Greece, the older reproductive fish were also hunted there into their hiding places, and the offspring is therefore absent. Ruthless exploitation has far-reaching consequences for the Mediterranean ecosystem. Since the large predatory fish, such as tuna fish and large groupers, are increasingly absent, more and more jellyfish and inedible fish spread to fish, including the poisonous invaders from the Red Sea. The many soft corals are also interesting for oncology research because some species contain very special toxins that have an extremely toxic effect on cancer cells, and a toxin from soft corals, polytoxin, is currently being intensively researched, which makes it necessary to dock the toxins with antibodies and/or nanoparticles only on cancer cells.
In my lab we work on a number of different projects where we're developing new targeted cancer therapeutics. And in one particular project we've found that we have discovered a new class of molecules called N-alkylicetins that we originally isolated from the egg masses of a sea snail. And we found that these compounds were actually effective in killing multi-drug resistant cancer cells. Activity against our multi-drug resistant cancer cell lines, because there is some overlap between the structure of these molecules and the way that they kill the cells with what we use commercially that are essentially ineffective in these cells. So this indicates to us that our molecules are working in a novel, different way that allows us to overcome these resistant properties in these cancer cells. When we looked at the cells under the microscope, that we killed 100% of the cells at a particular concentration of these N-alkylicetins, and only 10% of the cells were dead when they were treated with a commonly used anti-cancer agent, doxorubicin, that we use to treat breast cancer. So we're currently optimising these drugs so that they are safe and suitable for injection into humans. And this involves packaging these molecules into small lipid-based nanoparticles so that they become non-toxic and safe for injection. The development of resistance is one of the major limitations to the current chemotherapeutic treatment of this disease, and it can lead to local reoccurrence and ultimately relapse in a large number of patients. And these can be patients who suffer from blood cancers as well as solid tumours such as breast, ovarian, pancreatic, prostate and some gastrointestinal tumours as well. These results are exciting because any new finding that we make or any new discovery that we make in this space ultimately has major implications for improving survival in these patients.
Research into the genome of whale and white sharks revealed that they have more than twice as many base pairs as humans. Sharks have existed on Earth for 400 million years, humans for only 300,000 years. And yet, sharks have a superior genetic anti-cancer and wound healing regulation to humans, while the immune system of sharks is even more simply structured. We discover an approaching sea turtle and observe its hustle and bustle. These reptiles have been living well before the dinosaurs for 250 million years and today, like all marine life, suffer from the enormous pollution caused by plastic particles. The problem with plastic is that plastics do not really break down and dissolve, but only break down into smaller and smaller particles. Microparticles, and thus get into the food chain in the sea and into small creatures, which in turn serve as food for larger animals and so on. The plastic particles disturb and destroy the organs of the animals and they eventually starve to death. Simone and I make a side trip to the capital of Greece, to Athens, and explore some days this fascinating cosmopolitan city with more than 3.5 million inhabitants. Athens was also the center of the ancient Greece with the Acropolis, a city fortress on a temple mount with ancient buildings such as the famous Parthenon column temple. The almost 2,500-year-old Parthenon is the most famous still existing monument of ancient Greece. The Parthenon, which means virgin chamber, was the temple of the city goddess Athena. Simone enjoys the architecture and the panoramic view from the Acropolis over Athens. Now Simone needs a boost and is looking for a juice bar near the Acropolis to replenish vitamins and energy. A juice mixture with a lot of pomegranate strengthens it. We had never seen such a modern juice bar before. We leave the breathtaking city of Athens and sail to the island world of the Cyclades. Other friendly sailors accompany us with their boats. Simone is on board the smoothie, and even the wind and waves do not stop her from having a meal. She never gets seasick, but my brother Fabi unfortunately always feed the fish at wave. We sail to the island of Kythera, where we find the chance to have a closer look at the wreck on the small island Diakofti, which is visible from far away. In front of us, the wreck of the 127-meter-long damaged Nordland. The German freighter was then unable to maneuver in a storm and drifted towards the island of Kythera on 29 August 2000, stranded with the bow first in a tiny island and sank rapidly with the stern into the depths. We dived down to the wreck, and even though the ship landed quickly with the stern on the seabed, no people were injured in the accident. But unfortunately, the nearby beaches suffered from heavy oil pollution. Shipwrecks are very mysterious biotopes for us. The wreck is wonderful to dive and recognize that the propeller had eaten its way into the rocks at a depth of about 30 meters. Skipper friend Toby with his guest Niels at the helm of the sailing yacht. Keeping the psyche under control is a challenge in many serious illnesses. We reach the town of Adamas on Milos. The idyllic little harbor city offers us the opportunity to explore the island from here. The colorful houses of the enchanting fishing village called Klima in their rainbow colors. For us, an admonition to take the climate change very seriously, because with rising water level, sometimes the houses do not only drown down here. Already now the sea with its waves often splashes on the colorful balconies. The most famous sight of Milos is certainly the white rocky landscape of Sarakiniko, where we feel as if we have landed on the moon, but there is also blue to turquoise water here. Wind and seawater cut bizarre shapes into the rock here, and man has also created caves in the rock there. They say the caves were made by Cycladic pirates. With other sailing friends, we plan the next trips and prepare the departure by storing diesel and provisions for the next days. Our route takes us to the city of Naxos. We hear about the misfortune that happened with such a big ferry almost 20 years ago of the neighboring island Paros. We investigate the history of the sinking of the ship near Paros' capital Parroquia and want to find and dive the wreck. On the way to Paros, one of the catamaran fast ferries comes very close to our small convoy of 4 yachts. Not far from Parroquia, we locate the wreck of the Express Samina ferry in sight of the rocky coast and prepare for a dive. The wreck is only a short distance from the coast of Paros at a depth of 40 meters. The sinking of the Express Samina ferry was a disaster for the Greeks. The 3 of us dived down. The ship collided on the night of 26 September 2000 with a rock known as the Gate of Paros, about 5 kilometers from the port, where the 2 rocks tower high above the water and a beacon on them warns of danger. The 150-meter-long ship ran in the storm with 2-meter-high waves on autopilot and drifted from the course on the rocks, tore holes in the flank and suffered fast water intrusion into the engine room. Around 23 o'clock in the night, the ship sank, on which 533 people were on board, 80 of whom died in the floods. When we dived around the wreck, I found an eerie atmosphere of horror, because only 3 of the 8 lifeboats could be brought to water by the people on board in time, before the ferry lay too fast completely on its side and then sunk rapidly. In the darkness of stormy night, there was total panic on the sinking ship, and the crew is said to have left the passengers to themselves. It is said that the team was more busy watching a football match, Hamburg against Athens, than keeping an eye on the course of their ferry.
It was an amazing wreck, big ship, and you can't help but think about all the people that have left their lives there, 83 people.
And I'm so sad.
For such a stupid mistake.
For football.
Yeah, it was like a gravesite.
Simone and I sail on to the island of Syros in the middle of the Cyclades. Its capital, Hermopoli, is both an industrial city and a city of culture. The old town, with its many marble streets and paths, reflects the wealth that was once created here when the shipping industry still generated wealth. Simone looks at the work of art on Syros on the beach of Kini. The statue of a mermaid with a drowned man in her arms is a memorial to all those who lost their lives at sea. We are told by a local German sailor who has been living on Syros for 30 years and is married to a woman from the island who, as a heat doctor of a hospital, had herself fallen ill with lymphoma cancer and had to go through the hell of chemo. Fortunately, the political attitude towards cannabis also changed in Greece, and new laws legalized the medical use of cannabis in 2018, similar to what had already happened in Germany in 2017. Meanwhile, it has become mid-November and our sailing friends Joa and Flo want to bring their yacht to the winter quarters. Also, for us, the sailing season ends in Syros. We leave our Eagle here in the fishing port of Hermopoli after the second sailing summer and head back home. Adventure journeys also serve to find oneself again, and often the survival path is the most important goal. And Simone, no metastasis of her melanoma could be detected over the last few years during renewed tumor control, but the tumor in the eye unfortunately did not disappear. Simone wants to go high, feel the freedom above the clothes and the fastness again. Because in her the decision matured in the last instance to perform a dangerous operation of the eye after all. It is usually the naked fear that drives a person to take more and more life-threatening risks in order to get rid of a tumor. This also makes sense if previous natural attempts to defeat cancer are not sufficient. Simone then decided in November 2017 to have the entire eye with the 1 centimeter tumor surgically removed. Even though she was very afraid of the not exactly harmless operation, luckily everything went well, and today Simone is fit again with an eye prosthesis and tumor-free. Simone's way of life, with all its highs and lows, has probably had such a positive effect that she has not yet developed metastasis despite a very poor prognosis 6 years ago. Simone has tried her best against all her illnesses as long as it made sense and had followed her wits. She is happy to be alive today. On her many-year-long sailing journey, there was always only the goal to survive cancer and to enjoy life somehow.